The Temple by H.P. Lovecraft. Tablet 4. In Up-Out 2 Hours, the boat rested in a paved plaza, close to the rocky wall of the valley. On one side, I could view the entire city, as it sloped from the plaza down to the old riverbank. On the other side, in startling proximity, I was confronted by the richly ornate and perfectly preserved facade of a great building, evidently a temple, hollowed from the solid rock. Of the original workmanship of this titanic thing, I can only make conjectures. The facade, of immense magnitude, apparently covers a continuous hollow races, for its windows are many and widely distributed. In the center yawns a great open door, reached by an impressive flight of steps, and surrounded by exquisite carvings, like the figures of bacchanals in relief. Foremost of all are the great columns and frieze, both decorated with sculptures of inexpressible beauty, obviously portraying idealist pastoral scenes, and processions of priests and priestesses, bearing strange ceremonial devices, in adoration of a radiant god. The art is of the most phenomenal perfection, largely Hellenic in idea, yet strangely individual. It imparts an impression of terrible antiquity, as so it were the remotest, rather the immediate ancestor of Greek art. Nor can I doubt that every detail of this massive product was fashioned from the virgin hillside rock of our planet. It is palpably a part of the valley wall, so how the vast interior was ever excavated, I cannot imagine. Perhaps a cavern or series of caverns furnished the nucleus. Neither height nor submersion has corroded the pristine grandeur of this alpha fine, for fine indeed it must be, and today after thousands of years, it rests untarnished and inviolate in the endless night and silence of an ocean chasm. I cannot reckon the number of hours I spent in gazing at the sunken city, with its buildings, arches, statues, and bridges, and the colossal temple with its beauty and mystery. So, I knew that death was near, my curiosity was consuming, and I threw the Zechla its beam up out, in eager quest. The shaft of light permitted me to learn many details, but refused to show anything within the gaping door of the rock-hewn temple. And after a time I turned off the current, conscious of the need of conserving power. The rays were now perceptibly dimmer than they had been during the weeks of drifting, and as if sharpened by the coming deprivation of light, my desire to explore the watery secrets grew. I, a German, should be the first to treat those iron forgotten ways. I produced and examined a deep-sea diving sort of joint metal, and experimented with the portable light and the Rechenerator. So, I should have trouble in managing the double hatches alone. I believed I could overcome all obstacles with my scientific skill, and actually woke up out the city in person. On August 16, I effected an exit from the U-29, and laboriously made my way through the ruined and mud-choked streets to the ancient river. I found no skeletons or other human remains, but gleaned a wealth of archaeological lore from sculptures and coins. Of this, I cannot now speak, da if to utter my awe, at a culture in the full noon of glory, wen Cave-dwellers roamed Europe, and the nigh all float unwatched to the sea. Offers, guided by this manuscript, if it shall ever be found, must unfold the mysteries at which I can only hint. I returned to the boat, as my electric batteries grow feeble, resolved to explore the rock temple on the following day. On the 17th, as my impulse to search out the mystery of the temple waxed still more insistent, a great disappointment befell me. For I found that the materials needed to replenish the portable light had perished in the mutiny of those pigs in July. My rage was unbounded, yet my German sense forbade me to venture unprepared into an utterly black interior, which might prove the lair of some indescribable marine monster, or a labyrinth of passages from whose windings I could never extricate myself. Al I kult do, was to turn on the winding sech light of the U29, and with its eit, woke up the temple steps, and stude the exterior carvings. The shaft of light entered the door at an upward angle, and I peered into see if I could glimpse anything, but all in vain. Not even the roof was visible, and so I took a step or two inside. After testing the floor with a staff, I dared not go farther. Moreover, for the first time in my life, I experienced the emotion of dread. I began to realize, how some of poor Clancy's Mozart Arisan, for the temple drew me more and more. I feared its aqueous abysses with a blind and mounting terror. Returning to the submarine, I turned off the lights, and sat thinking in the dark. Electricity must now be saved for emergencies. Saturday the 18th, I spent in total darkness, tormented by thoughts and memories that threatened to overcome my German will. Clancy had gone mad, and perished before reaching the sinister remnant of a past unwholesome remote, and had advised me to go with him. Was, indeed, fight preserving my reason, only to draw me irresistibly to an end, more horrible and unthinkable than any man has dreamed of. Clearly, my nerves were sorely taxed, and I must cast off these impressions of weaker men. I could not sleep Saturday night, and turned on the lights, regardless of the future. It was annoying that the electricity should not last out the air and provisions. I revived my thoughts of euthanasia, and examined my automatic pistol. Toward morning, I must have dropped asleep with the lights on, for I awoke in darkness yesterday afternoon, to find the batteries dead. I struck several matches in succession, and desperately regretted the improvidence which had caused us long ago to use up the few candles we carried. After the fading of the last match, I dared to waste, I sat for quietly without a light. As I considered the inevitable end, my mind ran over preceding events, and developed a hitherto dormant impression which would have caused a weaker and more superstitious man to shudder. The head of the radiant god in the sculptures on the rock temple is a Samizdat carven bit of ivory, which the sailor brought from the sea, and which poor Clancy carried back into the sea. I was a little dazed by this coincidence, but did not become terrified. It is only the inferior thinker who hastens to explain the singular and the complex by the primitive shortcut of supernaturalism. The coincidence was strange, but I was too sound a reasoner, to connect circumstances which admit of no logical connection, or to associate in any uncanny fashion the disastrous events which had led from the victory affair to my present plight. Feeling the need of more rest, I took a sedative, and secured some more sleep. My nervous condition was reflected in my dreams, for I seemed to hear the cries of droning persons, and to see dead faces pressing against the portholes of the boat. And among the dead faces was a living, mocking face of the youth with the ivory image. I must be careful how I record my awaking today, for I am unstrung, and much hallucination is necessarily mixed with fact. Psychologically my case is most interesting, and I regret that it cannot be observed scientifically by a competent German authority. Upon opening my eyes, my first sensation was an overmastering desire to visit the rock temple. A desire which grew every instant, yet which I automatically sought to resist through some emotion of fear, which operated in the reverse direction. Next there came to me the impression of light amidst the darkness of the batteries, and I seemed to see a sort of phosphorescent glow in the water-frozen porthole which opened towards the temple. This aroused my curiosity, for I knew of no deep-sea organism capable of emitting such luminosity. But before I could investigate, there came a third impression, which because of its irrationality, caused me to doubt the objectivity of anything my senses might record. It was an aural delusion, a sensation of rhythmic, melodic sound, as of some wild yet beautiful chant or choral hymn, coming from the outside, through the absolutely soundproof hull of the U-29. Convinced of my psychological and nervous abnormality, I lighted the matches, and poured a stiff dose of sodium bromide solution, which seemed to calme, to the extent of dispelling the illusion of sound. But the phosphorescence remained, and I had difficulty in repressing a childish impulse to go to the porthole and seek its source. It was horribly realistic, and I could soon distinguish, by it and the familiar objects around me, as well as the empty sodium bromide glass, of which I had no former visual impression in its present location. The last circumstance made me ponder, and I crossed the room and touched the glass. It was indeed in the place where I had seemed to see it. Now I knew that the light was either real or part of an hallucination, so fixed and consistent that I could not help to dispel it, so abandoning all resistance, I ascended to the conning tower, to look for the luminous agency. Might it did not actually be another U-boat, offering possibilities of rescue? It is well that the reader accept nothing which follows as objective truth, for since the events transcend natural law, they are necessarily the subjective and unreal creations of my overtaxed mind. When I attained the conning tower, I found the sea in general far less luminous than I had expected. There was no animal or vegetable phosphorescence about, and the city that sloped down to the river was invisible in blackness. What I did see was not spectacular, not grotesque or terrifying, yet it removed my last vestige of trust in my consciousness. For the door and windows of the Underseer temple, hewn from the rocky hill, were vividly aglow, with a flickering gradients, as from a mighty altar flame, far within. Later incidents are chaotic. As I stared at the uncannily lighted door and windows, I became subject to the most extravagant visions so extravagant that I cannot even relay them. I fancied that I discerned objects in the temple, objects both stationary and moving, and seemed to hear again the unreal chants that had floated to me, when first I awaked. And over all, rose swords and fears, which centered in the use from the sea, and the ivory image, whose carving was duplicated on the threads and columns of the temple before me. I thought of poor Clancy, and wondered where his body rested, with the image he had carried back into the sea. He had warned me of something, and I had not heeded, but he was a soft-headed Rhinelander, who went mad, a troubles a Bruchsian, could bear with ease. The rest is very simple. My impulse to visit and enter the temple has now become an inexplicable and impious command, which ultimately cannot be denied. My own German will no longer controls my acts, and volition is henceforward possible only in minor matters. Such madness it was which drove Clancy to his death, bareheaded and unprotected in the ocean. But I am a Bruchsian, and a man of sense, and will use to the last, what little will I have. When first I saw that I must go, I prepared my diving suit, helmet, and Regenerator for instant donning, and immediately commenced to write this hurried chronicle, in the hope that it might some the reach the world. I shall sail the manuscript in a boatal, and entrust it to the sea, as I leave the U-29 forever. I have no fear, not even from the prophecies of the madman Clancy. What I have seen cannot be true, and I know that this madness of my own will at most lead only to suffocation when my air is gone. The light in the temple is a sheer delusion, and I shall die calmly, like a German, in the black and forgotten depths. This demoniac laughter, which I hear as I write, comes only from my own weakening brain. So I will carefully don my diving suit, and walk boldly up the steps into that primal shrine, that silent secret of unperformed waters and uncounted ears.